Hello everyone, welcome to another session on previous paper analysis from UPSC Mains. In this we'll be covering General Studies paper 3 from 2014 UPSC Mains. In this video, particularly we'll be covering questions 11 to questions 20. If you want analysis of the questions 1 to question number 10, please watch the earlier video in the same series. Let us begin with question number 11 without any further delay. Question number 11. Can overuse and free availability of antibiotics without doctor's prescription be contributors to the emergence of drug-resistant diseases in India? What are the available mechanisms for monitoring and control? Critically discuss the various issues involved. So the question they are asking you is the unnecessary and overuse of antibiotics by people. So antibiotics are drugs that are to be used when and if and only if prescribed by a doctor and in the manner which the doctor prescribes it. But in our country we have the problem of using Schedule H and antibiotic drugs or antibiotic drugs that are Schedule H in nature, meaning they cannot be sold by a pharmacy or a pharmacist without the presence of a or without showing a prescription. But to a greater extent, this rule is overlooked both by individuals and also by pharmacies. As a result of it, people have easy access to antibiotics, and generally in those scenarios it always leads to unnecessary and overuse of antibiotics. Now when you are answering this question, you explain that process because certain rules and regulations are not followed in proper procedure. This increases access of antibiotics to people without doctor's prescription. As a result of it, we are seeing an overuse of antibiotics, and it is leading to certain complications and leading to scenarios where we are seeing diseases evolving to drug resistant stages. Now the final answer should be again a solution based, where you say, yeah, this is a problem. So we have to come up with procedures and ensure control over who and when people have access to, more likely who has access to antibiotics, and when they can have access to those said antibiotics, and also set in place safeguards and checks and balances as to have a clear procedure and system to check the issue of overuse of antibiotics in our country. So that is one possible way to answer this question. Coming to question number 2, in a globalized world, intellectual property rights assume significance and are a source of litigation. Broadly distinguish between the terms copyrights, patents, and trade secrets. So what are the important areas or focus areas for this question? So first you have to give an introduction as to what intellectual property rights are. Why are they important? And why they lead to litigation in the first place? The final portion of the answer should be a clear distinction or differences between the terms copyrights, patents, and trade secrets. Coming to question number 13. Should the pursuit of carbon credits and clean development mechanisms set up under UNFCCC be maintained even though there has been a massive slide in the value of a carbon credit? Discuss with respect to India's energy needs for economic growth. First, explain what are carbon credits. Second, why has what were the reasons particularly? Why did the value of a carbon credit depreciate in the first place? Why their value went down? Second. Third, what is the scenario in Indian context? So, in that backdrop, how should India proceed? Or how should the carbon credit system that is maintained by UNFCCC proceed with these in their mind? Coming to question number 14, drought has been recognized as a disaster in view of its spatial expanse, temporal duration, slow onset and lasting effects on vulnerable sections. With a focus on September 2010 guidelines from the National Disaster Management Authority (NDMA), discuss the mechanisms for preparedness to deal with likely El Nino and La Nina fallouts in India. Explain what El Nino, La Nina phenomenon are, what impact those two events have on Indian monsoon, and discuss what the NDMA guidelines are in this regard and the impact of drought in India. That should be our approach to answering this particular question. Coming to question number 15, environmental impact assessment studies are increasingly undertaken before a project is cleared by the government. Discuss the environmental impacts of coal-fired thermal plants located at coal pit heads. What is an environmental impact assessment? EIA. And what EIA should the coal-fired thermal plants must follow? That should be your approach to this question. Well, coming to question number 16, the diverse nature of India as a multi-religious and multi-ethnic society is not immune to the impact of radicalism which is seen in her neighborhood. Discuss along with strategies to adopt to counter this environment. So first you answer what radicalism is. Why India is susceptible to radicalization, and what are the issues that arise out of the neighboring countries adopting radicalism or radicalization as a strategy to hedge or counter India's growth. So, what India needs to do to protect itself from not only radicalization arising out of neighboring countries but also from within. Coming to question number 17, international civil aviation laws provide all countries complete and exclusive sovereignty over the airspace above their territory. What do you understand by airspace? What are the implications of these laws on the space above this airspace? Discuss the challenges which this poses and suggest ways to contain the threat. So, explain what airspace is, explain international laws in regards to airspace, and how can any country protect its own sovereignty in this regard, and what are the threats that they experience or they are exposed to in this regard. I think that is some summary of threats emanating in regards to airspace is something that you should be aware of. Moving to question number 18, how does illegal trans-border migration pose a threat to India's security? Discuss the strategies to curb this, bringing out the factors which give impetus to such migration. What is trans-border migration? How trans-border migration affects India's security? What should be the policy that India should adopt in thwarting trans-border migration, and threats or situations emanating from that or such kinds of migration. That should be our answer. Moving to question number 19. In 2012, the longitudinal marking for high risk areas for piracy was moved from 65 degrees east to 78 degrees east in the Arabian Sea by the International Maritime Organization. What impact does this mean or does this have on India's maritime security concerns? So they're asking why the International Maritime Organization changed the longitudinal markings for high risk areas from 65 degrees east to 78 degrees east in the Arabian Sea, and what are the implications that this has on India's security. So first explain what the IMO is and talk about the acts of piracy that were carried out in 65 degrees east longitudinal marking, particularly in 2012, and also explain why the International Maritime Organization had to shift its focus from 65 degrees to 78 degrees east in the Arabian Sea area. Finally, after explaining the reasons behind the decision making process of maritime organization, you elaborate on why this is a possible area of concern for India's own maritime security. See, this again means that India is more exposed to not only piracy but also international smuggling of both people, weapons, drugs, narcotics, to be very specific. And because of this, the issues that Indian maritime agencies have to navigate along or navigate in coordination with international law. So again, a lot of complications do arise out of such kinds of procedures or actions by organizations. You give out those complications in that regard. Coming to final question, question number 20. China and Pakistan have entered into an agreement for development of economic corridor. What threat does this pose for India's security? Critically examine. What they are essentially asking for is CPEC, that is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, that passes through Pakistan occupied Kashmir, that is Indian territory. CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, passes through Pakistan occupied Indian territory, that is Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Why it is a greater threat to India's own security? So explain that what CPEC is in the first place. You explain the specific point of the passage of CPEC through not only POK but also Aksai Chin areas. Why this infringement is not only an infringement of Indian territory but also of Indian integrity, territorial integrity to be very specific. Why the presence of Chinese troops and Pakistani troops in Indian territory that they have occupied is a greater risk to overall national security of our country. So that should be our approach to this question. If you have liked this video, please like this video. My humble request is to share this video with fellow friends who are preparing for competitive exams. Please subscribe to the channel. While you are subscribing, don't forget to turn on the notifications by clicking on the bell icon so that you will be apprised whenever a new video is uploaded. Thanks for watching. Namaste.